Good evening, everyone. I'm Jennifer Homans, and I'm here to welcome you to tonight's event, Serenade, with Toni Bentley, who's also here with me, on the occasion of her new book, Serenade, A Balanchine Story. This is the first book-length study of this extraordinarily Balanchine dance to music by Tchaikovsky. Before we get started, I just need to say a few words about the Center for Ballet and the Arts, which is sponsoring this event. The Center for Ballet and the Arts is an international research center that I founded in order to sort of further the art of dance and to help bring new ideas to our art form. We have a fellowship program that includes both scholars and artists, but we also have a series of public programs, and this event is one of our public programs. I'm not going to take the time now to talk too much about it, so there will be information and a link to our website in the chat if you'd like to find out more. As a matter of housekeeping, I just need to tell you, if you have technical difficulties with tonight, you can message Christian or Courtney, who are on the CBA team, and they will do whatever they can to help you. And we will have a Q&A session at the end, so please put your questions in the Q&A button. I'm sure you all know how to do that by now. So finally, we can get to Toni and our event. Toni Bentley danced with the New York City Ballet in the Balanchine era for a full decade. She's the author of 5 books, countless articles, and her bio is also in the chat so that we don't take too much of our time tonight on these kinds of things. In addition, you will see in the chat a link to Toni's website, and this is the important part, which is also has information about her book, and you can find everything that you need there. Tonight, we will be talking together. We will also show some clips, we will show some images, and we will end with the Q&A. So to begin, Toni, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here with everyone in the audience. And with you, Jennifer, we go way back. Jennifer used to come to me to wear my toe shoes back when we were both dancing. And I also want to say thank you so much to the CBA team, Courtney, Andrea, and Kristen. It's been a really incredible pleasure setting all this up with you. So thrilled to be here with you.
So, when Toni and I were talking about this event, we thought it might be a good idea and fitting, since the subject of the book is Serenade, that we would structure the event as a performance. So we're going to begin with a reading from the book that will, I think, set the stage for us. And then we're going to show a short video clip of the beginning of the ballet, one of several excerpts that we'll do in the course of the evening. So Toni, why don't you read from us just to begin so we get a flavor of this book?
Sure, thank you. Okay. Serenade is a blueprint for Balanchine, and I believe for the entire art form called ballet. And it is also a blue ballet in a literal sense as well. Not cerulean or cobalt or indigo or sapphire, but slightly closer to aquamarine, a kind of soft gray blue, not so gray as a gloomy day, but not so bright as sunshine either. And at certain times, a glowing all but midnight blue, the color of wraiths caught between the rays flung by the night sky, who are but shadows of their shadows. Balanchine said that Serenade had no story. It was, he said, just a dance in the light of the moon. He made this ballet to Tchaikovsky's music in the early months of 1934, just a few months after landing in America for the first time, arriving via Western Europe from Russia, where he was born during the reign of Nicholas II and the last Tsar of Imperial Russia. It was not only the first ballet he made in America, but also the first complete American-made classical ballet by anyone. For the 50 years Balanchine lived after he made this ballet, he kept being asked the same question over and over. What, Mr. Balanchine, is Serenade about? But he kept saying the same thing about the moon. It is among the pale blue tulle, the peach satin shoes, the dusty rosin box, and the soaring violins that the ballet lives. It commences with a shielding of the nightlight, then moves to a closed opening under the moonlight, where rites of love, of freedom, of fettered fate are performed, and finally to a death, or is it, headed straight into that beam of the moon. I believe Serenade is about the birth of an artist, a woman artist. But uncannily, though simply, it doesn't tell the story the way a poem or book would. It is the story itself, the woman itself, herself. She is our Rosetta Stone. As a dancer dancing it over and over again, meaning you have already had your 10 years or more of daily training and reached a sufficient level of accomplishment to be in the position to learn it in a professional ballet company, you might actually become an artist, meaning one who can transcend the quotidienne and make beauty, be beauty, might. This book will be about this transcendence and about what lies behind that luscious maelstrom of movement, poured metaphor, blind yearnings, thwarted longings, and the many losses necessary to attain flight. Never before had a ballet moved like this, like peeling waves of ocean, like rising and falling tides, with eternity always near, not as illusion, but as place.
Thank you. Before we talk about that, we're going to see a short clip from the dance. Most of you have probably seen this dance anyway. So Tony, you have danced this ballet countless numbers of times, and now you have written this book. But there's been a long period between when you danced the ballet and when you wrote it. And I assume it's been with you all of those years. So I wonder if you could talk about why did you write it? Why now? And what is it about Serenade that you told us something in your reading, but tell us more.
Yes. Well, yes, I first learned Serenade when I was 16 years old in the school, the first year that Suki Shora staged a Balanchine ballet. And I had never seen Serenade. I had never seen any Balanchine ballet. They didn't pay for the house in those days because he was already sort of recognized as a legendary figure by then. And so the first thing I knew was getting placed in that sort of double diamond at the beginning. I was placed last, one of the first two at the front of the stage because I was small. So the whole time Suki was placing everybody, I thought, you know, with some other girls that we were going to be understudies and weren't going to be in it. So I danced it before I'd even seen it, much less understood anything about it. But we had the steps and we had the music. And if you have those with Balanchine, you have a Balanchine ballet. Obviously, I didn't think about writing about it then. The way the book specifically came about is I was asked in around 2007 if I would write about Balanchine. And I immediately said, no, that's not my specialty. I can say now that is the specialty of Jennifer Homans, who, as some of you may know, is coming out with, I am sure is going to be the definitive Balanchine biography this fall. But that kind of digging in archives, I love a little digging, but not that much. But then I thought, and they said, well, what else? And then it sort of came to me. I said, I'll do a biography of Serenade. There was no question that was the ballet that you know, had so many stories, was such a part of my life. I danced it for the whole 10 years I was dancing, probably about 50 times, I think. And so it started out, and it was at Yale University Press then. So I kind of conceived of it as a biography of a ballet, like one might do a biography of King Lear, you know, the great masterpiece of a great master, which was a good idea, I think. I still think it's a good idea, but it had a more academic bent to it. And clearly, by fact, that wasn't the book I was able to write. I did a lot of research and I wrote maybe 10, 20,000 words sort of early on. And then I stalled and just did many, many other things, avoiding it. And then 2 to 3 years ago, I decided I either have to get this off my desk. It became the book I couldn't write. I'm sure there's some writers in the audience and you know what that's like. And then I decided, well, I had better either do this or really commit to not doing it. So I had written an entire diary about why I can't write this book. There was, I think, so much fear and lack of confidence because writing about dance is, first of all, impossible, which makes it quite interesting. Because it's a three-dimensional, in-the-moment art. I hate boring ballet books, of which there's, you know, it's easy to write a boring ballet book because you're writing about something that's alive on a, you know, on a page, two-dimensional at best. So I then, I started really with a 15-minute timer. My fear was so great. I never really have quite understood this, but I think I can probably summarize it saying, I didn't have the confidence. How could I do Balanchine justice? How could I do Serenade justice? Of course, but on the other hand, there's a freedom in knowing, well, I have failed before I start, so why don't I start? Anyway, and I then proceeded to get it out. Now, it's 40 years after my first book, and why it took Winter Season, why I have to say by definition, I wasn't able to write it until now. And I think it was really a question of I didn't want to deal with the depth of feeling that that whole world brought up for me, you know, of Balanchine, my love for him. I want to make it very clear, as I do in the book, you know, I wasn't one of the ballerinas who was particularly close to him. I was one of the last he chose. I had about 6 encounters with him, all of which, of course, were very meaningful to me. I was in the corps de ballet, but I really represent, I think, and I've gotten feedback about this, how we all felt about him. We love this man so much. And then Serenade itself is, of all his ballets, I think it's probably fair to say the most beloved. Since this book came out, I keep getting messages, emails, texts, Instagrams, even whatever, of people saying, it's my favorite ballet. It's my favorite ballet. I've always loved this ballet. It's the best ballet in the world. There seems to be a really, it's very beloved as opposed to other masterpieces that might be considered otherwise, but the Serenade is so adored, and I think particularly by women, and that is quite interesting because it's about a ballet about many, many things, including women, which is, and of course was probably based on the fact that in 1934, he mostly had only female dancers. And of course, you know, his life was about celebrating beautiful women in his ballets.
Okay, so let's get to that, because that is really such a core piece of your experience and of this book, and obviously of Balanchine's whole art and his life. And it's something I've also thought a lot about. And so, you know, who are these women, and what are they doing there? And what did you mean when you said it's the story of an artist?
Yes, well, obviously everything I say about Serenade is my interpretation, because he, in the passage I read, said there is no story. So really, one has to begin with that. So this is all what I think, and it's what I believe, and it's what I kind of know in my bones, but someone else may feel differently, and that's valid. This was one of Balanchine's many, many great dealings with the outside world and the press, which is he never explained anything. He absolutely refused, and knew that people would put upon things their, you know, projections, as we call it.
Yes,
but
you were one of those women, and so we're asking you and your experience, not about.
Well, my experience was that in dancing this ballet, I had never felt that beautiful. I really wasn't that beautiful before. It's not, it's the sense when you have Tchaikovsky and you have that beautiful long blue tulle costume and this incredible lighting. I of course came to it when it had come into its, final costume and full, he even was still adding choreography in the 60s and then changed the hair in the 70s. This was a ballet notably that he tinkered with for 50 years, which was quite unusual for him. He was changing it, and he also very religiously watched it night after night after night in the wings. It never stopped interesting him, which is quite interesting. And to move to that music on stage. Now, the usual thing, as I say, is that Mr. B, we'd all be in our positions, and then Mr. B would walk into the front wing, his wing. I mean, we all knew it was his wing, next to Perry Sylvie, the stage manager, and he would lean on his elbow on the little piece of wood. It wasn't even, it probably had splinters in it. It was, backstage, so that he was so close to the audience that his nose was probably, might have been showing if anybody had looked. He would stand there, and then he'd come at the last minute, the music was playing, the curtain would lift. And can you imagine, we've got 2,800 people out there in the New York State Theater, as it was at the time and will always be to me. And Balanchine, the one we really cared about the most, the one who had created this world for us, this world of Tchaikovsky, of blue beauty and of movement. Like, for all the variations in class, we never moved like this. And this massive, like, flowing and having to, run with each other. I mean, it's incredible that there aren't more traffic jams on stage. There are so many places where the ballet, we're running here and running there, and then have to land somewhere on, on the notes of music. It's a very flowing and very freeing experience. And of course, alongside that, one as a young dancer is always worried, am I good? Am I doing it right? I better not make a mistake, etc. And I, in particular, danced the Russian dance from the beginning, which is a kind of almost like a demi-solo or something. We're all dressed the same, all the principals, everyone in Serenade. It's part of the democracy, which we might talk about. Everyone's dressed the same. You can't tell one dancer from another except for her movement. But in the Russian dance, we have sort of an extra dance. And it's very, very difficult. It's one of the hardest ballets I danced in terms of getting out of breath, running off stage, running back on. You were really exhausted at the end, but the exhilaration of it was unlike anything you can imagine.
So why is it about women?
In Balanchine's world, everything is. Yes, well, I think the ballet most obviously really celebrates the beauty of women, the way the trained, classical ballet female body moves and can move. And then there's, there come in all these many stories, as I'm sure everyone in the audience who has seen it, there's all these mysteries, layer upon layer upon layer of mysteries, especially when we get to the elegy section, where the dark angel comes in, she's covering the man's eyes. He dances with many different women. There's a lot going on. And the way I see the end result of all of it, to me, is it's always focused on the women. The men are very brief in the ballet, and they kind of come in as a support, and then they leave. And then the final image of the dance is very much about a kind of a transcendence, a going to the heights, going perhaps to heaven. There's many ways to say it. And I think it's an incredible celebration of what I would call female freedom. And I think it's sort of interesting. He made this in 1934, a long time before Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem, and then on and on and on, all these many, many waves of feminism that we have had. And he made us very independent. Now, he, of course, kind of encouraged that backstage too, our independence. So anyone who makes a ballet like that makes women so beautiful is giving them and the audience a great, great gift of value. And, you know, we know through history and to this day, women aren't valued by men, by society. You know, things are changing. We're not going to get into politics here at all, but also by themselves, having taken it from all their growing up. And the sense of our own importance in the core, whoever you were, that we were so valuable was, well, it was unprecedented in my life and probably many of ours.
Yeah, so often, there's this sense that dancers, it's like discipline, and you're sort of in the chains of your art form. But
Yes.
I mean, I danced the same role you did, and I've never felt so free.
Yes.
And I loved what you said towards the end of the book, when you said free of the men, and you just said it again. The men come, the men go, and then you are still you.
Yes. It reminds me of what Madame Danilova, who was one of my great teachers in the school, one of the great Russian dancers, who was Balanchine's second wife, kind of common law wife, and who had come out from Russia with him in 1924 after the Bolsheviks came in. And one of the many things she said, she would appear for class in these gorgeous outfits. She was well into her 70s. With her beautiful legs showing. She always did a 30-minute class herself before. The sense of discipline and confidence. She had the eyelashes, she had the full eyeshadow on. She was all in, and the outfits were all dyed to order. She had a blue outfit with a blue skirt and a blue handkerchief that she'd drop on the floor for a little flourish every now and then. And one of the many bon mots that has stayed with me for a very long time is, and she, of course, well, Balanchine was one of her partners, as we say now, but I think she had at least one husband and probably many lovers. She was I call her in the book, the Dietrich of ballet. She was really a very dynamic woman. And she said to us as little young students, she said, and of course we knew nothing about men at that point. We're like maybe 14, 15, and in the ballet world, at that time in Balanchine's world, we were truly innocent. And she said, the men, they will come and they go, but you will always have your work. And that resonates to me always. And that's a very independent woman.
Yeah, exactly. So what about the cost of getting there? The cost of staying?
Yes, you mean all the training?
Yeah.
That one goes through? Yes. Well, yes. Yes, it's massive.
Yeah.
Right? You did it, Jenny. It's massive, but the way I can only say how I see it now, which is I am just ever more grateful every day that I went through that. The good, the bad, the ugly, the tears, my hip went bad. I had to stop dancing early. That wasn't so great, but the training and the competitive nature, there's always, Danilova always used to say, there's always going to be someone whose leg goes higher, who turns faster, who's better than you. Always, always. And in the atmosphere of the school and the company in the sort of mid-late 70s, early 80s, at the end of Balanchine's life, the caliber of dancers was beyond the beyond. I mean, it had reached technically, and and he handpicked everybody. It was everyone there was somebody that he chose himself. So when we were about, say, 100 people, quite a big company at the end, he chose everyone because he liked something in them. I can only say that I am a great believer in discipline. I don't know how anyone can live a life without discipline in almost every area, from doing the dishes to taking care of one's house, to taking care of life, even, what my nephew calls admin, all the bills and all this business one has to do in life, to taking care of one's health, to dancing a Balanchine ballet. It's about discipline. And we were learning discipline the way nuns would learn, to pray in the convent, day after day after day. Say, if you were very upset, you had to dry your tears and get back and do it better. It was relentless. Much of it self-imposed, but it was in the air that the standard was beyond high. The standard was beyond perfection. Perfection was not something Balanchine was interested in at all. This was, I think, in hindsight, I think one of the things that I berate myself for. I was a little too afraid to go beyond being perfect. Not that I was perfect, but to really go as far as he wanted dancers to go took a lot of courage and a lot of risk, including certainly falling down or slipping, but a lot of moral courage, I think. And I think when I was dancing, I didn't quite have the oomph to do that. But, you know, there were other things in store for me. So I can only be incredibly grateful, not only for that whole world, but all the endless hours at the bar, the endless hours of not being good enough, sleeping in a frog at night so that, you know, you wake up more turned out in the morning. I'm only grateful for having learned that. I don't know how I would have learned it otherwise. Yes, you know, and you know, we all survived, right? It's a very unusual training, starting very, very young with this kind of competition and discipline, physical discipline. That then, you know, becomes, I think it goes internal. And a truly great dancer like Suzanne Farrell, for example, I see as having, she managed to go so far that she could externalize this kind of internal moral beauty, not in an acting way, which Balanchine, of course, hated, but she truly could emanate her deepest self.
And one of the things that's interesting is that there is all of the, you know, of course, all the things that you talk about with the competition and the daily discipline of it all. And then it puts you in this dance that you so beautifully described, where, you know, there's 17 of you. And as you say, you become a kind of society.
Yes.
You're bonded in a way, even if you
Very much.
been through all of that together and maybe not always liked each other so much, but that's different.
Yes. It was, well, it's interesting because there was absolutely fierce competition. I mean, from very lowly things like, you know, people stealing some favorite leotard from somebody else. There was sort of, you know, human, ridiculous jealousy stuff. Some of it probably very painful, but in the end, and I'm, you know, in touch with many of my peers from that time, in the end, we are family. Even if we haven't seen somebody for 20, 30 years, we are family and we are all bonded through Balanchine. Our love for him and what we learned from him, we all learned the same things. So it's an incredible kind of bonding, despite, you know, at the moment, there's also this competitive atmosphere, which is absolutely necessary, of course, to achieve any high level of execution, which is what we, you know, we had in the New York City Ballet at the time. So it's all, you know, yes, there's a lot of hard knocks, but I mean, if I, not that you just asked, but if I had a daughter now, I would not particularly encourage her to dance. It's a very, very hard profession. You make no money. You probably won't make it. You're very unlikely to be a star. And, you know, you can't go to college. And then you're done when you're 30, 35, 40 at most with nothing else to do. I mean, that was, I think, something my parents worried about. But for me, I can only say I feel incredibly, the incredible luck that I was in the right time and place, that I got to have Balanchine as my teacher, because that was, you know, the greatest teacher and the greatest education I could have. You know, we all felt that way.
Yeah, no, you know, let's get back to Serenade.
Yes.
And let's move on to the Dark Angel. And, you know, here's my question, and then we're going to watch something, and then maybe we can talk about the question, which is,
yes,
the question is kind of, what does love have to do with it?
Yeah.
And who is the Dark Angel? But Christian, I wonder if we could watch that selection before we talk about it. Oh, it's powerful every time you see it, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Moment. I mean, so what do you make of the Dark Angel?
You're asking me to interpret.
Yeah.
Well, yes, no, I'm joking. I'm sorry, my cat wants to get involved here. So in that clip, we saw Maria Calligari as the Dark Angel, Leonid Kozlov as the man, the anonymous man, and who was Darcy was the waltz girl, Darcy Kistler. Well, as you see, the Dark Angel comes in behind the man with covering his eyes, and he is pointing forward. The thing that sticks with me most is what Balanchine apparently sort of by mistake said to, I think, his first biographer, Bernard Taper, which is that the Dark Angel is his fate. So she is his destiny. And she sort of leads him blindly, and then he stops with this they stop behind this girl, and there's a kind of embrace. This is a famous moment where Balanchine, though I don't know that he ever admitted it, but it was well known, he certainly didn't contradict it, took from Antonio Canova's beautiful statue of Cupid's Kiss with Psyche, where the girl underneath, the waltz girl, she reaches up and they reach down. It's very, very beautiful. And then this famous turn that we saw, very, very much rehearsed, where Maria steps onto her arabesque and the man goes underneath her tulle skirt, which I'm sure didn't look so good when they had short skirts before the Kirinska costumes came in 1952. And he turns her around the world, which I think is a really epic moment in not only in Serenade, but in all of ballet, this kind of turning. What goes on to happen there is basically, I sort of hate putting this in a nutshell, is it appears that there is a love connection with the waltz girl. And then at the end of it, the Dark Angel comes back and they kind of repeat what they did, what we just saw. And then he leaves the waltz girl. She again goes lying down on the ground, which is, of course, unusual in 1934. You know, Petipa didn't have women on purpose lying down on the ground, on the stage floor. And the Dark Angel leads him off. So one can certainly see that as if he stopped, he had a love affair, for example, and then his destiny has other plans for him. Now, this, of course, is easy to think, and it probably is very autobiographical, but I consider every Balanchine ballet to be autobiographical by definition. You know, Balanchine loved women in real life. He had the 5 wives and everything. So, but his work was always, of course, what he was doing. So it's very, very beautiful, and it's very ephemeral. And I have in the book different people's interpretations. Some of them are quite funny. You know, they think one of them is the wife, one of them is the mistress, one of them is the this. Somebody thinks the Dark Angel is the wife, you know, like lording it over him. That the girl on the floor, one dancer said, you know, she said, I just have an affair with him, but I don't get him. It's not fair. I mean, it's all quite humorous, really. But this is what Balanchine did. He creates this kind of drama that is open to interpretation. But it's interesting, I think, that the Dark Angel was always called the Dark Angel. And for him to even give a name like that is quite interesting. There's a Dark Angel, of course, in Orpheus, danced by a man. But, and whereas the other 2 main female dancers are just called, we call them the waltz girl and the Russian girl, or the jump girl. Yes, it's the most dramatic and whirlwindy part of the ballet, coming towards the end. And then at one point, a 3rd girl comes on, and it becomes this one man appears to be getting fought over by 3 ballerinas, which I also consider to be probably sort of an autobiographical something. Balanchine said of the whole ballet, I had a dream that it could be like this. You can interpret that how you like, but the world could be, his world could be like Serenade, I think is lovely.
I wonder whether you think there's, you know, I always thought it was also partly, you know, there's like shifting points of view. You know, suddenly man comes on, we're seeing it from his world, his view, even though he's blind. Blindness and light. And And then we go back to the women's point of view. And so there's a kind of way in which we're everywhere at the same time.
Yes, yes, yes.
In all places, from all points of view. So there's a kind of almost empathy in the whole thing that is impossible to have in life.
Yes. And also in The Dark Angel, that man is obviously a very, very significant character, but he hasn't really been around before and he doesn't really come back. So in terms of, as you very wisely say, about different points of view, it's immediately one thinks, Balanchine famously said, when people kept saying, what's the story of anything, he said, you've got a man and a woman on the stage, that's already a story. Right. So when the man comes in and there's embracing and there's dancing, much of it quite passionate with a lot of, lifts and throws and lunges around, one, of course, interprets it as some kind of a love story, inevitably.
And yet there's also maybe another way to watch it, which is just, which I know, we've talked about before, which is to just watch it.
Well, exactly.
Words, right? To try to get rid of what you and I are tied to words because that's what we do. But,
yes.
But
well, or according to Mr. B, you could also just listen to it. He always said you can just close your eyes with any ballet, the music, he was a musician first and valued the music probably more than any choreographer in history. And always said you can just close your eyes and listen because we always had a wonderful live orchestra. And that was fine with him too. So
on that, Christian, I wonder if we could see the Tchaikovsky images that we have.
Oh yeah,
in the book actually. And Tony, you go into some depth in the book about Tchaikovsky, and not so much in the sense of a musical analysis, but more.
Do you want to talk about these images for a minute, or should we go straight to Tchaikovsky?
Go to Tchaikovsky, unless you want to talk about, unless you have something to say that you want to say.
Well, I will just point out, since they're there, that, and I do write about, particularly, I don't write about many specific dancers in the book, but I do write about Maria Calligari, who was the reigning dark angel of my era, and she was in the film clip. And these are two wonderful images of her. The first one in Workshop, when she was the dark angel. Judith Fugate is on the ground there as the waltz girl, and then 10 years later in The Company. And I think that's it. One can see a really beautiful imagery there of this great dancer's kind of growth from being, as a young dancer. She was maybe 17, 18 there. She obviously looks wonderful in every way, with a beautiful arabesque and neck and line and everything. But when you look at her later, I feel like it's very soulful about how she has so embodied the part, embodied her own body. And and of course the hair is down then. That was after, in the late 70s, when he took the hair down. That it's a wonderful way through images to see the growth of a ballerina.
Yeah, embodied her own body. That's a good way.
Yes, it's easy to not be in one's own body.
Where are you if you're not in your own body?
Yes, well, a good question. Not here and now, that's for sure.
Yeah. So Tchaikovsky, you write a lot about Tchaikovsky, but you don't write about the music so much. You write about his life.
Yes.
Why you included that?
Everything in this book, as I started out saying, this is not a straight history. It's not in a certain category. It's not history. It's not all personal. It's a kind of eclectic mix of things, which I didn't know if that would work, but that is what I wanted to do. So once I did that, I just wrote exactly what I wanted to write. It felt risky, but I also realized that's all I can do. And so I really, Tchaikovsky, has, of course, as I say, he's kind of the oral playlist of all young dancers' lives, because of course he did with Petipa, the great cornerstones of the 19th century, Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, Nutcracker. And we all grew up at the bar and in variations and Christmas performances, Tchaikovsky. And Tchaikovsky was really, I call him the musical father of ballet, in that he raised the standards when he deigned to write music with Petitpas's input. They wrote them in collaboration, the way Balanchine later did with Stravinsky. And by doing so, Tchaikovsky raised the standard. Before that, there was sort of, Minkus and Drigo and stuff, which is I still like them because they're part of my history, but they're not of the same level of this as Tchaikovsky. And of course, Balanchine did, I think, a total of 21 pieces to Tchaikovsky, and most of them weren't to music Tchaikovsky wrote specifically for the ballet, including Serenade, which was not written for a ballet. Tchaikovsky, I find to be a very, very sympathetic man. He loved the dance, and he was trained to be a lawyer in the School of Jurisprudence, but quickly found his métier as a composer. But he was homosexual, and probably many people in the audience know this, but it's often forgotten, I think, that he committed suicide at the age of 53, 9 days after conducting his last masterpiece, the Symphony No. 6, the Pathétique. It is still controversial. There have been books written about it, what the circumstances were. I think the official Russian version remains probably not the truth, but that he was, one way or another, maybe a liaison was going to be revealed. He was very aware of having shame brought on his family. So this is very, very tragic, and one sees in his music, the Pathétique was really written, and Balanchine believed this. He wrote it as his own requiem. And then, of course, Balanchine then used the Adagio Lamentoso in the Tchaikovsky Festival, 1981, I believe, as kind of his own requiem. So there's layer upon layer. So Balanchine's love for Tchaikovsky was infused in all of us, including in the school and all the Petipa variations. What you see there on the left is the page of Tchaikovsky's own score of Serenade. You can't really read anything on there, but it's in, I believe, both German and in Russian. And at the bottom, there's a little note by Tchaikovsky that reads, "The more numerous the instruments in the string orchestra, the more it will please the composer." So he loved his violins and his strings. And the circumstances of him specifically writing Serenade, I found very interesting. He was about 40 years old when it came about, and what was happening at the time is that he had been asked, commissioned to write an overture for a big exhibition, which became the 1812 Overture, which he did not want to write. In fact, I will read you very briefly what he wrote. He was a fantastic writer. He wrote many, many letters. Unlike Balanchine, who, as Jenny knows, left virtually nothing but about a couple of notes and a laundry list. Balanchine just wrote nothing. Tchaikovsky wrote to his publisher when they came to him for the 1812 Overture. It wasn't called that at the time. He said, "My dear chap, you seem to think that composing ceremonial pieces for the occasion of an exhibition is some sort of supreme bliss, of which I shall rush to take advantage and immediately begin pouring out my inspiration. I won't lift a single finger until something is commissioned from me." And then he writes, "For a commission, I'm even prepared to set Tchaikovsky music to the pharmacist's advert for corn medicine." He goes on to say in a letter to Nadezhda von Meck, his great patron and kind of benefactor, about this time period. He writes to her, "Imagine, my dear friend, that my muse was so kind to me lately that I wrote two things with great speed, namely a large solemn overture for the exhibition and a serenade for string orchestra. The overture will be very loud, noisy, but I wrote it without a warm feeling of love, and therefore will probably be of no artistic merit. On the other hand, I composed Serenade out of an inner urge. I felt it, and therefore I dare to think it is not devoid of real dignity. Thought that was very beautiful. So, and it's interesting, by 1812, which I mean is perhaps his most famous piece of music and certainly made his estate the most wealthy, he really despised it. And he wrote Serenade out of, it wasn't a commission or anything, it was something that came to him, and he called it Serenade, My Favorite Child. I came to love Tchaikovsky, his letters, there's volumes and volumes of them. He was, as I said, a wonderful writer, and he really revealed himself as an incredibly vulnerable and open and intelligent and extremely educated. He spoke many languages, human being. And he could also be quite belligerent. He wrote of Brahms, he said, called him, curse words that I won't even say on this Zoom, but then he would proceed to drink and party with him and get drunk with him. So I think and until I learned all of this, I just knew Tchaikovsky was the world of music. He wasn't really so much of a man to me, but as we know, he was of enormous importance to Balanchine. And the closest Balanchine did to an autobiography was on his deathbed. He agreed to talk to Solomon Volkov in Russian about Tchaikovsky. And this book that I'm sure many of you know, called Balanchine's Tchaikovsky, is really quite autobiographical, but he wanted to talk about Tchaikovsky, who died just before Balanchine was born. But he said, but we were both St. Petersburgers. And he felt very close to him. And of course, in typical Balanchine fashion, he would say, I talked to Tchaikovsky on the phone last night. I think when he announced the 1981 Tchaikovsky Festival, he was asked, why Tchaikovsky? Why now? And he said, well, Tchaikovsky called me and he said, nobody pays any attention to me. So he said, so we'll give him a festival. So I thought it was I wanted to look at Tchaikovsky more closely, the man behind the music.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me also is, as you say, I mean, it's very controversial and nobody really knows how Stravinsky died and whether he took his own life or not. But Balanchine believed he did.
Absolutely, Balanchine believed it, yes.
In the tragedy and in the persecution of an artist by his society.
Yes.
The intolerance of that society.
Yes. And in the interim, Tchaikovsky had an absolutely disastrous marriage. His brother Modeste was also homosexual, and there's letters where he wrote to him and he said, both of us as pedagogues, teachers, we can't do this. And it was a very tragic story that I cover briefly in the book. There was a young woman who had met Tchaikovsky, he didn't even remember, but who had decided she was very in love with him. She in fact wrote him a letter, after one meeting, and after yearning for him for 4 years, and said she would kill herself unless he married her. Not a good way to get together with someone anyway, but then he considered fate had provided this woman because he had to get married to kind of cover his tracks. And I think it remained completely unconsummated, and he was basically sort of revolted by the female form, I think. They lived together for a total of 60 days total, and it's quite sad. She went on and had some children, other lovers and stuff, but it didn't end well. But he supported her for the rest of her life.
So, I mean, I think that is one of the themes, and maybe this can take us to because we are running short on time, take us to our last clip, because there's something about, the way that you take these excursions in the book to Tchaikovsky, but also to Petipa, which we won't have time to talk about tonight, but there's something in the tragedy of these people's lives, the ways in which their faults, in the case of Petipa, some violence and abusive behavior, and the things we don't see in ballet,
yes,
are also behind it, and yet we can still have serenade from these.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, right. Well, these are the miracles of genius, to produce something so perfectly and utterly beautiful. You know better than anyone, Jenny. I mean, the suffering Balanchine had in his life was enormous.
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 So there's this juxtaposition of great beauty and great tragedy, which is what we're going to see at the end of this ballet. We have all seen, those of us who have had the luck to see it. And you've had the luck to dance, and I've had the luck to dance. So shall we watch the very end of the dance? So rather than us talking about it, I wonder if you read the very end of your book.
Yes. Let's see. Okay. This is very close to the very end, but it's discussing what we just saw in the video. So where do we go in Serenade's final diagonal? To where the light goes, to where it comes from. And the beauty, our plebeian princess who was thrice lost, takes us there. This is, after all, where we all first stood, where I stood when I was 16. The cycle completes, continues. We began the ballet shielding ourselves from the light and end by going into that light, becoming light. The journey of a dancer, the story of woman, all women, any woman. Mr. B gave us that, a little thing like that, he called it. Freed in our final incarnation from the exigencies of romance as our central drama, the men come, the men go, we remain, we press forward. We dance for dance's sake. We are but artists, first and last. Balanchine released us into the great wide fullness of female anarchy, our highest expression. His revolution was total, if lightly disguised inside a disciplined aristocratic art that brings us back to its birth father, Louis XIV. Radical to the core, Balanchine was that fearless in his love for us, for woman. You may or may not believe in heaven. I doubt I do, but I went there once. In Serenade, we are dancing for Mr. B at the pearly gates, his angels, ghosts, fairies, sylphs, Psyche reunited with her beloved Cupid. We are American girls learning to dance, recapitulating the origins of the very art we practice. We are not in a metaphorical heaven, but a real one. The only real heaven is the one that is here, now. We dance it here for you, while we dance it there with him, watching, leaning as he did night after night after night on his right elbow in the front wing of eternity, of the vast here and now, overseeing a dance in the moonlight.
Thank you. That's a beautiful end. I think we can turn to the Q&A now. If Andrea, you're ready.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Tony. My name is Andrea Salvatore. I'm the Associate Director here at CBA, and I'm going to read some of the questions from the audience for you all to answer. Our first question comes from Catherine Dickinson, and she asks, Tony, I just finished your book and really enjoyed it. I especially loved the part where you described seeing Serenade for the first time as an atheist beholding heaven. Can you please speak more about the spiritual and mystical elements of Serenade?
I'm laughing. Thank you for the question. I think it's kind of the thing that maybe is the most interesting and the most difficult to discuss and to write about. To talk about anything of a mystical or spiritual nature is very risky because it's really an experience. I'm really not sure what to say given that. But as you saw in that final clip, and perhaps a little in what I just read, it is, I mean, where is this woman going? Where are we all going? You know, we're going to another place. You know, Mr. B used to refer to the real world as not what we call the real world. And I subscribe to that too. The real world is somewhere deep inside all of us. One might call it your soul. It includes, I think, what Jung would call your shadow side, these deeper things where yearning and where grief and where deep love, churns around and changes and wants things that it wants, and all of these things are captured in Balanchine's art. A man of very, very few words, and this is why, I mean, it's seeing his art, seeing other ballets, Concerto Barocco, David's Bundlutanze, Robert Schumann's David Bundlutanze, so many, Violin Concerto. I mean, these are spiritual works, also of a very erotic nature. This is one of the things that is of enormous interest. I'm sure maybe we'll hear more about that in Jenny's book. To me, Balanchine combined the erotic and the spiritual in a way that is very, very rare, understated, but oh so there. And that this is very much to me from my own experience in his world and my own life to be the things that interest me the most, that are the most important in my life.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, I wonder if you would agree, Tony, that there was partly an interest in the paths to transcendence. And
yeah.
The paths to transcendence, could be dance, they could be eroticism, there were various paths that he explored, and
Yes.
those were two of them. And so I think of him very much as a mystic, and I think
Yes, absolutely. I absolutely believe he was a Sufi, and that ballet was the language, that above being a choreographer, I mean, he always said he was a teacher first, more than a choreographer. But of course, a Sufi is a teacher, that to me he was, and there was in the Adagio Lamentoso, he talked about Sufis, and I believe he was a Sufi. He was a teacher. And ballet was the form in which he taught. I firmly believe that myself.
I think there's a mystical quality to all of it, and he ranged, from. So it's and yeah, the Sufi content in Adagio Lamentoso is very explicit. So
yeah, yes,
and you reference that in the book.
Yes, yes,
Where does the light come from?
Yes.
Yes, Catherine. Catherine, I will tell you all, is a historian of religion. So hence your question. The questioner is a historian of religion.
Yes.
So he's one of our CBA fellows.
All right, I'm going to move on to a question from Vicky Bromberg Hoyos, who asks, it is difficult to ignore the elements in Serenade evoking Giselle. Hair loosens and falls, she falls, arabesque hops, and more. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, yes. Yes, I mean, I was going to mention earlier, but I'm so glad. Thank you for that question, Vicki. And there's quite a lot about it in the book, in a chapter I call The Anarchists, which is despite Balanchine's, hatred of Giselitis, where, with the sort of furrowed brow and trying to be soulful, which he fought against a great deal with us, that there is a legacy of Giselle that is, I think, one cannot avoid. I mean, now certainly the Kirinska costumes came later than 1934, but they certainly evoke the classic long tutu that in the Romantic ballets personified best by Giselle. And the Willies are very interesting women. The Willies, for the people who perhaps don't know, that is the white act, the second act of Giselle. And the way you become a Willie is that you are engaged or affianced to a man who betrays you. And so you die a virgin, and you join the Willies, and they are a band of gorgeous virgins dressed in white. They begin in most productions even with the veil, the wedding veil over their head. And their leader is Myrta, who is really, quite the convent mother leading the charge. And their job in life is that at night, I don't know quite what they willies do during the day. They go into the grave and sleep or something, but at night they wake up and any man that comes along, and I mean, it can be any man, but it's a man, and they dance him to death. And so this is what Albrecht, the hero of Giselle, has to contend with. And they dispatch with Hilarion, one of the Giselle's secondary lovers, or wannabe lovers. It's quite interesting that this ballet, which is still so important and done all the time, has this element of the female power, my God, and a great deal of rage and anger. But of course, it's presented, in this kind of very beautiful, romantic, ethereal, ephemeral kind of a way. But I was interested in writing about it. It was based on, the story was based on coming from the German Heinrich Heine story, and also from Théophile Gautier writing about these rageful women. And so in the groupings of women together, in the costumes, and also, as Vicky mentioned in her question, there's a lot of hops in and hops out, and then that really mimics some of the famous hops in Giselle in the second act, where the whole stage hops one way and the whole stage hops the other way, and it's very beautiful. The hair coming down is interesting because Balanchine didn't do that till the very late 70s, but that so mimics Giselle in the end of the first act going mad and tearing out her hair, which is very unusual in a classic ballet, but it shows madness is upon her when she discovers that she has been betrayed by Albrecht, and falling to the floor. These are echoes in Serenade that cannot be denied. I don't know that anyone ever asked Balanchine. I'm sure he would have massively avoided the question, but I see them there. And I see, in terms of, training as a classical dancer and dancing for Balanchine, that the whole history of ballet is with us, from Louis XIV through Taglioni, through Petipa, through all those great classic ballets, including Giselle, that we are then carrying them on in our work. And I see, and much of it is very evident to me in Serenade, without having to do a lot of parsing. But of course, in Serenade, we don't have this story. We're not killing men or anything. We're sort of past that. We're just not even interested anymore.
Well,
right. I mean, in Giselle, it's about revenge. And in Serenade, they're just like, whatever, have an affair, move on.
Well, the next question is from Gavin Larson, and it has to do with the history and the moving on of the ballet. So the question is, since Mr. B made many changes to Serenade and other ballets during his lifetime, now in the post-Balanchine era, we are faced with the challenge of not only maintaining his ballets, but keeping them vibrant. Can you speak about what you think can or should be done to keep ballets like Serenade relevant?
Right. Well, I mean, Jenny, would you like to answer that, or go first?
I mean, my view on that is I don't know. I hesitate in the same way you do, Tony, but I guess what I believe about Balanchine ballets is that they are not the same as they were when he was alive, and cannot be, because he's not alive. And that's simply a fact. That's not a defect or a fault. It's just, and so, he even said, I leave for 1 month and my dances are not the same. They're not my ballets, as he put it. Those are not my ballets. And so, what's the solution to that? In the contemporary era is that the people doing them have to make them live, and the ways that they do that are the ways that any artist has to do it. And so they're faced with the enormous task of in addition to bringing something to life, having that whole past to contend with. So it's not easy. And I think, that's the challenge, and it's a big one.
Yeah. I agree with all of that. I mean, I would just add, Balanchine didn't really care that his ballets went on. People talk about all of that all the time, but I think it's significant. He said, in 10, 20 years, people are going to have 3 legs and Concerto Barocco won't look the same. So while we're not at the 3-legged stage yet, it's already kind of miraculous that the curtain went up on Serenade in a number of different companies in the last months, for example, around the world. And I didn't actually see any of them specifically, but I'm sure it looked like Serenade. I know people who did, and it still gives enormous pleasure and beauty and teachings to people. It is definitely, it can't be, as Jenny said, it's a living art, and without him being there, they're not the dancers trained by him anymore, and they're not being rehearsed by him. And they're not living under him, being in the wing, looking at you. But they're architecturally so strong, Serenade specifically, as we're talking about here, that, Serenade feels pretty indestructible. You can put Serenade on in a school performance if the Balanchine Trust were to allow it, and it would still have impact. It won't have the impact that some of us remember of seeing the days of Allegra Kent in it, or Darcy Kistler, or, under Balanchine's eye in the given night. But the architecture of the ballet and the music and the steps are still there. But ballet is a very, very, very fragile art. I think Balanchine truly, and Lincoln Kirstein, would be very surprised that it goes on now 40 years later at all.
Well, we are at just almost at 7:15, and I know that Jennifer has a couple of closing remarks, but if we didn't get to your question, we will make note of it and try to get Tony to answer it, and we'll send you some answers if we can. So thank you for all of your questions.
Okay, well, I just want to thank many people, but especially the CBA team, Andrea, Courtney, and Christian, for the work that they've done to bring this event to us tonight. Not easy in a virtual world. And I want to thank Tony and for being here with us. And I want to thank the audience for being here with us, and all of you out there that we can't see, frustratingly, but thank you for coming. And Tony, thank you for writing this book and for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much. I so enjoyed this, Jenny. It's an honor to be with you.
Likewise, and we will see you all again at another event. And I always hate this part because everybody just kind of disappears. But we have to do it that way. So thank you very much for being with us tonight. Good night.
Bye.